process of going live on YouTube and then, of course, to WAF TV. So the process has begun. Fine. So we are now live on YouTube and we are live on WAF TV. So good evening, friends. A big welcome to you on this edition of WAF Gurus Live, which is on the legal advice and legal aspects in and around this lockdown, during and post. So we have a fantastic, team of speakers today to guide our automotive and mobility industry in India and worldwide on the legal ramifications, the protections, the compliances during and after lockdown, a topic on which we have been getting lots of queries. So we thought we should do something around that. So we have with us Dr. Akhil Prasad, who is a country council member of board of directors at Boeing India and the Boeing JV, and he's also the member of the World Auto Forum Hall of Fame. And of course, we have Mr. Yogesh Wadhwa. He's the country council legal head for Nissan Motor Company Middle East, and earlier he was in India as well. Of course, he also came to the Automotive Legal Experts Network, Alan, at World Auto Forum, and he did a fantastic keynote. And of course, we have with us Ms. Nandita Khurana, who is the Zonal Legal Head, Middle East, Africa, India, South Asia. I think I can go on for Michelin. And of course, you also gave a fantastic keynote at Alan, the Automotive Legal Experts Network in India, at World Auto Forum last year. And then, of course, we have Ms. Abha Tiwari. She's the legal head for Renault India, an aspiring young professional handling a very important profile. And of course, we have Mr. Vikrant Rana, who is the managing partner at SS Rana and Company, one of the leading law firms of India and the world. And if I'm not wrong, Mr. Rana, you have customers, clients in 70 plus countries, and do a lot of IP and corporate related work. And we were honored to have Mr. S.S. Rana and Mrs. Rana at World Auto Forum at the Global Hall of Fame, in which we had inducted them. And it's a law firm which is 30 plus years old. And I remember they're telling us that had we counted their practice also, which was prior to the firm, it would have been 50 years and not 30. So a big welcome to each one of you to this very important session. So quickly, what we can do, we can just go through what we had, set for us over here, the points that we had, discussed amongst ourselves that we will, speak on. So here are a few suggested points of discussion. This is for the benefit of our audience, the people who are watching us. And of course, our dear audience, anytime you have a question in your mind, let it not be there in your mind. Please post it in the comments. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching on WAF TV, there's a comments box there. Just post your question there and read us. All right. And this time we'll surely take those questions if we haven't already answered them. So the suggested points of discussion over here are: how should the companies be managing their contractual obligations, which has come out again and again? Then, a few statutory and government protections, rebates, SMEs, MSMEs can avail. And also there was this discussion that a lot of rebates and a lot of, packages have come up. So what is right, what is not right, how to balance, what to take, Then, of course, important legal compliances you still need to do during lockdown, which you can't miss on. Then commercial transactions, managing force majeure, which have been given left, right, and center, a 360-degree perspective to force majeure, then insurance coverage, legality related to renegotiation of a lot of agreements from both sides, buyer and seller, then managing your creditors and debtors. A few customers, for example, they might have left their vehicle. It might be in a workshop, and then the lockdown got announced. So what do? The car is still the workshop. So what are the rights and the duties from both sides, from the workshop owner, the OEM, the employees, and the vehicle owner and the consumer? Then a few customers might have their pending new vehicle deliveries from showrooms. So rights and duties again from both sides. Then a few employee health and welfare rules and plans, labor and employment, remote workplace, which we all of us are doing. So leave rules, staffing closures, layoffs, something, sad but true. Then, of course, corporate governance, something which is extremely, extremely important, and the relevance of the same For MSMEs and SMEs, then of course CSR related issues and application of ADR, if any, or mechanisms and international private law, if relevant, during and after lockdown. So these are the few points that we can discuss on, and we can delve on them. We can expand them, or we can go totally off the course also, as we feel like. So, starting with Dr. Akhil Prasad on this discussion. So, where do you see this situation going? What are the legal ramifications for the industry, especially focused on SME and MSME?
Anuj, this is quite unprecedented what we are witnessing today. Simply because in the known memory, I don't think anything has impacted the world the way COVID has impacted. It's a global impact. It's not like that this is something happening in India, it's something happening in the USA. It is happening simultaneously across the world. And that is where, the uncertainty comes in, the strategies fail. There you cannot copy a strategy that was something which was done years ago. Those things are no longer applicable. But I would certainly say that whenever there is an uncertainty, there is always a great opportunity. And the opportunity of this scale, where you know um, you have to do everything afresh, so no plans, nothing. For example, some governments, some countries took a little while to react to COVID. They did not know what to do and how quickly to react. Thankfully, our country did react in a very, very positive way and in a very quick way. It is unprecedented that a country of size of 1.3 billion could be locked down, especially by one government order. And this talks about the great federal and the state system that we have in India, that in a situation like this, which is such a great pandemic, that all states and center have come together to rescue and to come to solve the problem which impacts everybody. So to answer the first question, that what impact it would cause to the SME, my biggest worry is that only, because I feel that big industries who are multinationals, and who are for example Indian multinationals who have diversified their businesses across the globe, perhaps will be more resilient in terms of coming out of this problem. But my biggest worry is for the unorganized sector, the small and medium sector in India, where they do not have so many resources. The capital is scarce. People rely more on the internal funding than most of the businesses do not even get banking finance available. The financial institutions do not help them. Then there is also a issue of flight of manpower. So we have seen in almost every city where we are operating, there has been a mass exodus of people to different parts, to the rural areas, from the rural areas going back to the rural areas. So that is going to be a big worry for me, that how these SMEs and these small scale industries, unorganized sector of India, will survive this COVID impact. So whether it's going to come back, of course it's going to come back. The bright side of it is that India is, as I said, 1.3 billion people. The domestic consumption, the domestic market is huge. It will only It's only a question of time that supposedly today is day zero, when if we hear in the national press there has been no new incidents, there have been no new death. If that is a day zero, perhaps the organized sector will take about 30 to 60 days, 60 to 70 days to come back. But the worry comes from the unorganized sector, for which the problem, the pain may be longer than what it is for an organized sector.
Fair enough, Dr. Akhil. That's a valid point. So if we see that more than 90% of the businesses in our country are MSME, SME, what are the legal precautions, compliances they should take care of? Which they cannot get to know from a legal counsel because they don't have one. So what are the top three, four, 5 points, caveats, do's and don'ts that you would like to tell them?
See, for me, the biggest thing is, for any industry, it's a question of sustainability. So how do you sustain your business? is the biggest question that comes to my mind had I been an entrepreneur who wasn't in that segment. So the one of the biggest things I think is how to retain the people, how to retain the top people that I have in my organization, how to keep them motivated. The one of the important things that we have done in our organizations is we have about 4,000 engineers who operate from our Bangalore and Chennai offices and in Delhi. So one of the important things that we have done is to ensure that there is zero impact in terms of people working from home. So I'm not saying it's a legal compliance, but I think it's something which we have to solve together in terms of identifying the people, how to reach, how the laptop should reach them, how the desktop should reach them, how should they continue to work from home. Uh, in terms of manufacturing capabilities also, what we have done is there has been a lot of policy shaping with the government. For example, in the state of Karnataka, the state of Karnataka has recognized the fact that suppliers to defense and aerospace should be treated as essential services. And we have to make enough safeguards that people who are working in our organizations or our suppliers in the state of Karnataka or in the state of Telangana, we do a lot of interaction with the government. At the same time, we have to demonstrate that the distancing norms have been implemented. People who are still working on ground, we have to ensure that safe practices are adopted. We are providing them with all the safety mechanism like masks, like gloves, keeping medicines at the offices. And then business continuity to me becomes very, very important. In terms of other compliances, we continue to work online, with our suppliers, and the compliance work, especially related to today, the priority is safety of people, and whatever compliances we do with regard to the continuity of business and safety of people is something what I devote a lot of time on.
Great, that's fantastic. That's very nice to know, Dr. Prasad, that you're devoting a lot of your time on safety and compliances, and you're promoting work from home. So, getting Ms. Khurana in this conversation, Ms. Khurana, you are at a very important position, and you're leading this position for Michelin, a company which is into tires, into revolution business. So, you have hundreds and thousands of touch points of dealers selling your tires across the country. For a lot of them, and also for their teams who mostly are contractual workers, it'll be right now a matter of survival. How most of them would be hand to mouth right now, frankly speaking. So are there any policies or any guidelines, or some suggestions from the legal standpoint for them to help them overcome the situation in a better way?
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, we're living in such uncertain times, and like rightly used, unpredictable times, that I think it's collective. This is the time humanity has to show its best face, and so do corporates. And I think I understand most corporates are following the same principle, that safety first, protection of employees, and protection of all our partners. When I say protection of all our partners, I'm also talking about all our suppliers across the globe. How do we do this? We want to make sure that we're trying not to activate any force majeure, so that we can continue to actually work, particularly with the SMEs, with the small and medium sector, more than anything else. We want that supply chain to continue. And I think it's important at this particular point of time to continue to talk to your partners, because we, as maybe the giant compared to them, we find that constantly they're in fact leaning on us for advice, because for a lot of them we are their lifeline. And I'm not only talking about India. I'm talking even in places like Africa and the Middle East. In fact, across in the US and Europe.
True.
And what we're trying to do essentially is partnering, giving them opportunities. So, for instance, we would want to partner with our suppliers to maybe start the manufacture of masks. So we help them open up another production line, so that they can actually benefit from it in the long run, and we pick up some of that material. So I think that's very important, because let's just say the message from the top for every company is to protect the fragile population. And when I say fragile population, externally, really are these SMEs and medium scale industries as well, who are mainly our partners at this stage. And then we talk about our dealers. We have touch points, like you rightly said, hundreds and thousands of them. Their interest for us is paramount. So we are already figuring out how to manage the opening in the different countries. And we've already gone through this experience in China as we speak, because China is more or less back on track. Our factories have started production. People are back in the offices. Dealers have started to do their work. So we found that if you have maintained this contact with them for 4 to 5 months, I think that relationship building for most SMEs it's critical. It's absolutely critical, because almost all companies are speaking the same language at this point of time. We don't want anybody to sink. And then if you look at the various countries, the governments are doing their bit. If you look at the new law that's been enacted, that's come out of Germany, simultaneously out of Singapore, which is taking care of the situations, multiple situations arising out of COVID-19, 2019. We are seeing this as well, so the government also has taken cognizance of this. Even in India, I think there has been one advisory after the other, where you do not let go of your contractual labor, you don't permit layoffs. And I find that, yes, the larger companies are respecting it, but we will see mayhem in the coming months, particularly with partners who don't have this kind of support. And I think that's the time we will have to extend it. There is no right answer right now, Anuj.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you, Ms. Khurana. So, having a situation, in the house right now, suppose I'm a supplier, to a big, company, automotive mobility, you can take it any kind of company. That company has done a big donation, for COVID-19, a lot of CSR, but they've also issued force majeure to the suppliers. Suppliers now, their employees, their families are in the jinx. How do they pay their own suppliers? So tier 2, tier 3, the entire supply chain can fall like a house of cards. So what should a supplier do in this situation, this scenario, if they face a force majeure?
Tough question to answer, Anuj. Very tough, because it's expected when we talk about that 360 degrees. That's exactly what we mean. Because if you do not want a force majeure pushed onto you, you need to be very sure you don't pass it on as well. And what should they do at this point of time? I think first and foremost, if it's being pushed on them, they should challenge it. I think you need to document it somewhere. If you've received a force majeure notice, please go ahead and reject it for the right reasons, of course. And there are a lot of us legal professionals out there willing to help them, doing pro bono work and, assisting them to do this. And I think I can speak for all my legal colleagues when I say this. We are all available to them at this point of time.
Wow, that's fantastic. So we at World Order Forum would also like to make this announcement that if you are getting force majeure notices slapped on you, please hand them over to us. We'll see how we can help you. So getting Yogesh in this conversation now. So Yogesh, you have worked across geographies. You have worked in India. You have worked with Renault Nissan joint venture. You have worked. You're now working with the Nissan Motor Company Middle East, handling so many countries. So, what has been your experience? How is your organization, your industry in the Middle East handling it? What's the challenge? What do you feel should be the process to fix it? And Yogesh, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think thank you, Anuj. I'll say it's a very mixed kind of a reaction to everything. While I'll agree with everyone where they said that employee remain as the foremost person, and their safety and well-being is the right thing to do, and so is my organization looking into that. In fact, you can make a comparison of a lot of countries also, a lot of governments also are doing very very similar kind of situation. We take example of US or Europe, where while the employees have been put on a kind of a temporary kind of a layoff, is the government who's actually bearing their entire salary cost. We see very kind of similar kind of situation in India also, where in India the government has issued notification saying that no layoffs, no salary reduction. So these are the kind of measures which have been at one side enforced by the government, but equally most of the companies I see that they're ensuring the well-being of their employees. In my company, it's again very very clear kind of reasoning which has been given that at this point of time, They are going to ensure that no kind of deduction happens, all the employees are well taken care of, and we need to ensure that the continuity happens. But having said that, I think it was one of the difficult questions which Nandita just answered. We are in a situation where we are putting our suppliers on a force majeure. I think from a business continuity perspective, that's one of the things which we need to see how we also safeguard our interest. So at one side, where most of the companies might be sending force majeure kind of notices to the suppliers, equally, we are working along with them just to ensure that how we can best support them. From a company to company, we give a lot of targets to the suppliers, and their kind of profits, or what we call as the variable component, is based on the targets what they achieve. So I think almost all the companies, they are working on a kind of a scenario where they need to see how the targets could be relaxed. How do we ensure that the suppliers, because they are our partners, we work along with them? But yes, these are very difficult kind of challenges and situation, and there are no clear-cut answers at this point of time.
Sure. And situations like, what we can mention in that write-up also, suppose any consumer, his vehicle has been left at the workshop, and lockdown has been announced. So the vehicle is in the custody of the workshop owner or employees. And also if a person made a payment, for a new car delivery and the delivery is pending, what are the rights and duties, towards these situations?
Well, definitely, if the payment has been made, it's all under lockdown right now. No one can go out or deliver the car, but it's going to be the responsibility of the dealership, the company, that as and when the lockdown opens, the car is going to be delivered. We are also, putting various kind of measures and educating people what happens to their rights, in such kind of situation. Equally, on the after sales part also, that how do we maintain our cars at this point of time? They could be emergency kind of situations where you may need to go out, and God forbid if there's a breakdown, what do we do? So these kind of education kind of measures are also going out. Our people are there to help. We have issued special kind of numbers where the consumers can actually reach out for any kind of a help. So those kind of measures are very much in place.
Okay, so fair enough, fantastic. So now getting Ms. Tiwari in the conversation, who heads legal for Renault India. So Ms. Tiwari, while I was talking to Yogesh, a question cropped up in my mind. You know, OEMs work a lot on SOPs, right? So the dealerships have to work on basis SOPs, and if they don't follow SOPs, the OEMs can actually tell the dealer, "Hey, I'm not part of the liability. You did not follow my SOP." So, do you feel that sanitization of vehicles, sanitization of facilities post lockdown should be a part of an SOP? A theoretical scenario, if a customer acquires, corona, covid, or if he or she alleges that they have acquired from your dealership or your factory or any of your facility, whether owned by you or by one of your partners, what is the legal stance, and what are the legal liabilities, rights and duties in such a scenario?
Thank you. Thank you, Anuj, for this question. So I'll take a step before. So typically what happens is that given our relationship with the dealers, so all measures approximately are taken to make sure that it is in the interest of the health and safety at all times, not just during COVID, but at all times. While COVID happens to be an extraordinary situation, but at the same time, there are workshops. Workshop has tools, equipments, and they are maintained at a certain standard and with a certain taking care, a certain safety precautions are all around that. So this particular incident can arise at any point of time. It is not limited to COVID. However, if we only have to speak about COVID and the implications, so at the moment, what is being done is that highest measures of safety, while we at the organization level, and not just for my organization, see, it is all across, not only limited to the auto industry, to FMCG or whatever, because the time for which this virus can survive has been recorded and given in different papers in different studies for different durations. So it can happen anywhere. So all measures are being taken to make sure that any incident does not arise as a consequence of any lapse on the safety standard. However, especially with regard to taking liability. So now this becomes again a very difficult question, because do we all know that COVID So I would give you an example, when we start writing this, or when I began writing these force majeure clauses, we used to write, okay, government acts can happen. So we write in a specific pattern, and we say that, okay, because of government acts, there could be, a party could be excused from performance of their obligations. For a lot of riots, political situations, including nuclear wars, could have been contemplated. But I personally used to think, epidemic, pandemic, really, will this ever happen? How many times did we actually ended up interpreting this clause of force majeure? This was 1954 and then 2017. And how many times did this matter go to Supreme Court? So this is a very extraordinary, difficult situation. And all across the globe at the moment, all efforts are being made to ensure that the touch of humanity is not lost. So saying that we take off all liabilities just because you did not follow the process, I would on the contrary say that we know that the processes have been violated. We still support them because it is business. We're not interpreting, we write contracts, okay, we will invoke these contractual obligation when time comes. But do we do it all the time? No, we don't do it all the time.
But I think as organizations, especially as automotive companies, especially into retail, I think a lot of such cases might crop up. There could be there are people who have genuine behavior, and there are people with malefites.
Absolutely, this always happens. It'll always happen, and I'm too sure that a lot more than this would also happen. We have to be just prepared for it. We have to address it as it comes. I mean, there could not be one watertight answer which addresses to all the questions at this moment.
So something what the dealers or these distributors or their teams can be kind of prepared with, so that if they suddenly receive a legal notice that, hey, I got COVID from your facility, I am slapping damages of these many CRs on you, come to the court. So they should not be sitting ki unke haath paun phool gaye. They should be able to think through some process that, hey, I heard this process on WAF Live Guru, so I can have a clear thinking.
Right.
So something on that?
Follow the best safety standards, take all measures which are announced by different medical authorities, I would say at the moment. Okay. Do we have everything about this virus? I don't know. If we have had that, if we had the privilege of having everything, I'm sure we would have had a vaccine. We don't know.
Fair enough. So getting Mr. Rana in the conversation. So Mr. Rana, you have been very patient enough to listen to everyone, and you're also the luckiest because you have everybody's thoughts now, and you can really summarize and make a rocking speech, and we'll give you some extra minutes also, because we made
wonderful. Thank you so much. I would start with Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. So all world is one family. We're all connected. And the human relationship, everybody mentioned about that. That's very critical in these times. It's affecting everyone. And if a dominoes effect is likely to happen if somebody starts invoking the force majeure clauses. But I'll take Abha's question first, about the issues if somebody comes to a workshop to, get the delivery of a car, and they somehow are positive on COVID. So we were actually discussing this yesterday with the client and all, that to start with, whenever the lockdown actually this opens up, it would be critical that companies would start asking their employees and also their partners to probably have a certificate to show that they are not positive. That could be a good start to have it at your workshops, to see that, at least tomorrow, liability wise, you can say that we did the best we could. We had all of them tested. These are all negative cases, at least at that point in time. So that liability, at least the bona fides are there to say that we did our job there. There was a show about the German thing. So Kurzarbeit is a very, the German government always used to have it, and they have now enforced that. So almost 2/3 of the salaries of the German workers, they still are on the roll of the German companies, but their salaries are paid by the German government right now. So that's a good initiative, indeed a good initiative. And I think considering the size and the mix in India, it's quite difficult, but I still think the government is doing their bit to have come up with different advisories, be it on the labor front, be it on other financial fronts. So labor, there've been many advisories, not just from the CLC, the Chief Labor Commissioner, the Regional Labor Commissioner, but even the MHA issued advisory because of the migrant issue on 29th of March, they issued an advisory stating that no migrant labor should be allowed. I mean, they should not be laid off or any wages reduced. So that wages, in fact, there was a news report of SpiceJet laying off some people. But immediately the labor commissioner, they connected with them and they asked that layoffs would not be, it's better that we don't have any layoffs or reduction of salaries at all. So that is a big challenge for SME and MSMEs, that how to, you conserve your cash, but yet have all people onboarded. So those are challenges which I believe, would be coming in the future. Force majeure is definitely one of them. We're looking at that. Labor issues would be there. The migrant labor, which has gone back, would be an issue. You wouldn't find labor coming back to the cities again, at least in the short term. So those issues would crop up, and it'll be very a lot of challenges for the SMEs and the MSMEs to bounce back. So it would take time before they can do that.
Fair enough. So,
sorry, if I can.
Yeah, sure. Please feel free.
I was just going to add to what Vikrant said. Primarily that once the lockdown opens up and possibly before the employee joins back, we can try and ask them for a certificate if they are positive. Probably Abha is going to take the same question. So we have been facing similar kind of questions from our HR and management also. And one of the thought process was that if you ask such kind of a question, will it be against the privacy of individuals? Are we going to, infringe on someone's privacy by asking these kind of scenarios? So we can't possibly, you can share your thoughts also.
So these are not normal times. The question is, these are not normal times. Otherwise, in the normal times, if you would ask someone for a certificate to say they are, positive or negative, or for other issues, that could be. But these not being normal times, and this being a disease which can explode in a certain contact possibility, where in a workshop or a factory or a showroom, this can be there. So this could be there. It's still a debatable question, but I believe that some things would have to be there to balance out that this does not spread out.
Just to add one more thing here, given the infrastructure for testing availability at the moment, how much can we essentially stress upon and derive the benefit of it, especially when government is still trying to procure and make sure that the necessary kits are available so that the necessary testings could be carried out. And let's not forget that after airlines become operational, there are all the countries are not going to come out of this situation at the same time. So a lot of it is going to be devoted to that segment also. Now, how much can we stress the already existing infrastructure? And if we do so, can we be held in violation of a certain standard, of a certain policy or a government guideline?
Fair enough. Dr. Akhil, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So Anuj, one important question that was asked was on the invocation of the force majeure provision.
Yes.
So, which is very relevant. But one thing also is very relevant, that in today's world, the companies that we all are representing in this forum today, and also our suppliers, the first question when we receive a notification of a force majeure from our suppliers is, what is that work which is subject to a force majeure? For example, today we have an obligation to provide manpower. These manpower can do work from home. So the question that we should also our suppliers is, what is that work which is hampered by this force majeure? You can all work from home also. So for example, I receive a notice from my supplier that COVID-19 has come up. Government of India, government of a particular state had put up this notification. So we are asking our suppliers to tell us what is an on-site, what is an off-site support that is getting impacted. So which is a very important measure, because, for example, in the auto industry, if I have suppliers which help me on the design of an automobile, for example, or testing facilities, those things can also be done supported from home. And that is exactly what we should be asking our suppliers. What is the impact of this force majeure?
Yes.
If I may add, Anuj, I think we will be talking about the doctrine of frustration in the Indian context as well, because that's also going to come into play. And this will only be decided on a case-to-case basis as far as I can see it happening, which is really what we should be doing for all our suppliers and otherwise.
All right. Yes, Yogesh, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so I was just giving a different perspective to what Akhil Saab said.
Sure.
So, there could be a lot of scenarios where it is important to actually prove how your obligations, which you have under the contract, they are actually getting affected. And if you normally look at the force majeure clause, there's always an exception which says that if your obligation is only towards making a financial payment, that is not an excuse. Now, we are facing scenarios where there have been a couple of scenarios where, say, for example, the order has already been placed. And the only obligation which the company has is now to take the delivery and make the payment. The company wishes to take an exception that, sorry, what will I do with this supply? Whereas from a manufacturer perspective, the vehicles, or it could be anything, mobile phones or anything, it's already manufactured. So they need to supply. So whether this kind of a thing will actually fall within the scenario of a force majeure, I think that is what Akhil needs to, that's what he was suggesting. So it's a very important kind of a thing and very debatable, I'll put.
So basically, in short, malifieds cannot be allowed. You can't take force majeure as a plank, as an excuse not to pay.
Very much.
Very much.
See,
In fact,
sorry, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted
in fact,
to show the points, which the other points that we also need our attention, lest people later say, "Arey yaar, wo to reh gaya, ye bhi reh gaya, wo bhi reh gaya." So yeah, Abha, you want to say something? Then we can just go.
Yes. So there's a very interesting judgment that Bombay High Court has given, and this I believe had come up to yesterday or day before yesterday, and contemplating this concept of force majeure. So here, the Indian suppliers wanted to invoke this clause in order to avoid encashment of letter of credit towards a Korean supplier, and the Korean supplier had already dispatched the shipment. Now here, the court very categorically said that this contract for encashment of letter of credit had nothing to do with the underlying transaction between the supplier and the receiver, and still especially because it was already declared as essential service, they could not go and take the recluse under force majeure. And finally, the clause which was drafted in the agreement was more to provide benefit to the respondent, that is the Korean company, and therefore this Indian company was not allowed to take the benefit of force majeure. And anyways, in the precedents and history that we have seen, force majeure always has a very narrow and strict interpretation, which means only if it directly has an impact and bearing on performance of the contract can the parties be excused. But again, let's not forget the duty of notification, the duty of ensuring of the mitigation of losses, the duty to provide alternate possibilities and methods of providing these services. So I don't think that at all in any judicial precedent or by the law there is any intention to allow a party not perform the obligation under an agreement or in a circumstances like this just because an impact has been seen across the globe. No, it has to have a very strict interpretation.
Great. Mr. Tiwari, that was surely very helpful and I'm sure very educative for our viewers. So I'll just go to the list of topics that we are supposed to discuss, if you can see them here. So something on contractual obligations, statutory and government protections, a few legal compliances that we still cannot do over during lockdown, commercial transactions, then something on employee health, welfare, labor employment, ADR. Let's feel free to address them if something comes to our mind, which is extremely, extremely important amongst these topics.
So a lot of waivers and timeline has been granted, I believe, across entire spectrum of regulatory bodies, beginning from Ministry of Company Affairs to the SEZ regulatory authorities. I think there are a host of benefits. For example, if I could just quickly recollect, the timeline between two board meetings was supposed to be 120 days, which is now extended to 180 days. Something like the meeting of independent directors once in a financial year, which is supposed to happen otherwise, has now been done away with for this year. So that waiver is again given. There's something which has come up where the companies are, and especially this will be very helpful for MSMEs, because this allows them to comply with the regulations of MCA without having to pay any delay, any fee for delay in filing of any documents, statements, whatever. So I think over then again for the creation of, so all filing related, GST related filings have been extended, which was supposed to happen say by 31st of March or 30th of April, has now moved on to June or September. So I think over, and every day we're seeing that, since about 20th or 19th or 20th of March, we have seen almost every day there is a waiver or deferment of date or waiver of fee or waiver of penalties coming in. And I think this is more like an opportunity that should be taken up by MSMEs to be more compliant maybe, and then take the advantage of time. Not to forget the RBI guidelines, which has declared moratoriums, 3 months, which has been granted for deferment of EMIs, and SIDBI coming up with a package of loan without collateral. So I think a lot of benefits have been given.
So more than required, I guess, huh?
Not sure, but then it definitely helps.
Surely, fair enough. Nothing is enough when it comes to supporting our people in these unprecedented times. So something on employee welfare, health, work from home rules, and the most contentious layoffs, which might be happening or just might start to happen as life resumes. Rights, duties from both sides. Please feel free.
Anuj, I'll add my bit. As we spoke briefly also earlier. So if you look at this scenario of layoffs, which is something which most of the employees are fearing at this point of time. If you look at the organized sector, and let's take an example of a couple of countries also. Vikrant mentioned about Germany, where a portion of your salaries is being taken care by the government themselves. We can take an example of Europe and US, where employees have been sent on furloughs, temporary kind of layoffs, and it's the government who is actually bearing 100% of the cost. Similarly, I can take example of Saudi Arabia, which comes under me. The government is coming up with regulations where 70% of the employee salary will be borne by the government in case the company is looking to temporarily suspend or terminate anyone. Very similar to India, where the government has issued notification that no layoffs or any kind of retrenchment is going to happen for next 3 months. But then the debatable topic is for how long even the government or the companies which are in a very difficult kind of situation can actually sustain. There are times where there are no revenues, everything is shut, and then say for example there are fixed costs. They could be the lease cost for a company, there could be taxes which the company has to pay. So the debatable question is for how long this may continue and for how long the company may be able to sustain, or even the government. All these measures seems to be very, very temporary, say for 3 months. If the situation continues like this beyond 3 months, then where are we heading to? It's a very open kind of a question.
Absolutely. So, and having said that, if our experts here will also like to talk on, once the lockdown opens, people start going back to the offices, and there are team meetings happening. A lot of cost cutting will start coming in. So layoffs, furloughs is one. The other part is renegotiation of all the contracts with all the suppliers. So a lot of renegotiation will happen. So a lot of these clients and customers will say, it's my way or the highway. You want business? This time, I'm giving you business. That's more than anything else. And it is at this rate. It is at this SLA. It needs to happen. Or thank you very much. So how should it be managed from both sides? Renegotiation of contracts, commercial transactions. If Ms. Khurana, Dr. Akhil, Mr. Rana, please feel free to add.
See, the renegotiation of the contracts will definitely depend upon what is the demand cycle, which will impact a particular industry. Talking about the automobile industry, unfortunately, has been in recession even before COVID. This only, the COVID only puts the industry into a further stress or strain, I would say. But nevertheless, the common thing is that this strain is for everybody. It is not that automobile manufacturer is in an advantageous position or in a disadvantageous position so that the suppliers can take a mileage out of them. What I think is relevant in terms of contracting is a common pain point should be first recognized. So it is not about that I am a manufacturer, automobile manufacturer, and I only see my point of view. So for me, if I am the general counsel of an automobile company and I am for the aviation company, so I would also like to sit down with my partner that together we have to solve a problem. If I am very transparent to my supplier that this is the problem I am facing, there is a less demand, say for planes, or there is a less demand for cars. If I am willing to take a haircut, you should also be willing to have a similar haircut. And both of us will only survive if we see the problem together. So for me, a contract has to be seen in a holistic way so that we are able to achieve a win-win for both the parties rather than trying to only negotiate for my particular client. In terms of coming back to the original question of layoff, unfortunately, that would be a reality. And in those times, I think what needs to be seen is how do companies, I think, and it will be a big learning lesson for all companies to absolutely classify its manpower. What are the technological advances which should be done, more investments towards technology. So those kind of rethinking will come up during this COVID times, in my view, Anuj.
Fair enough. Ms. Khurana, you want to add something to that?
It's interesting that Akhil mentions technology, because what we're discussing, what we're discovering is how easy it is to work from home. And when you talk about cost cutting, it is probably one of the things that every single company is looking at this point of time. I know I can vouch for a few. And that's your straight measure that will be taken the way I foresee it, because technology is out there to help us. And in fact, the way we work, the way we do our business on a daily basis has changed completely. The world is going to be looking different. And when you talk about, the contracts that we have and renegotiation of contracts, that is a fact of life that we live with. But I think really companies like ours, the larger companies, will have to walk that extra mile to protect the weaker partners over and above the stronger ones. And until and unless you mutualize your ambitions, because I think we've been discussing about, is this a U curve or an L curve that we're looking at? And it's going by what we have seen with SARS-1, which happened a few years ago. We find the typical consensus, I think, amongst economists and legal experts is this is looking like a U curve at this point of time. So don't forget, I mean, if it's a U curve, we really do need our suppliers, so they will all be down at this point of time. So everything we do will need to be done rationally, will need to be done in partnership. And I think this is the same principle we will need to apply to all our employees, to the workforce, whether you talk about layoffs, retrenchment, pay cuts, because at the end of the day, this message has to come from the top. It cannot come from anywhere else.
Fair enough, totally agree. So whether it's a U or a V, but it is surely V for VUCA. So Mr. Rana, I would like to ask you a very important question. What should be the role of a law firm? What should be the role of a law firm right now to support and empower country councils in these challenging times?
I think law also has to have a heart. I think these are the times where it's more from the heart than the mind. But still, it is for some it'll be easier who are cash rich there. But like everybody mentioned, after a couple of months, it would play on. It would be difficult to retain many people, and there would be either layoffs or retrenchment or reduction. So it would be, the bigger picture, I think, like what you mentioned, is the bigger picture that it would be a U curve and we would bounce back. So it is better to be together. So I think the contracts, the agreements, negotiation would also be keeping in mind that we all are together in this, and this is just the bottom, and we would grow out of it together. So I think the legal would also have to have the same bandwidth, the same wavelength with the general counsel, that this would be getting out together. So we have to be with the suppliers, employees, as well as the clients. I think all three coming together with the company. All three have to come in together to see that we come through out of it, in a growing more mature out of this.
Fair enough. And one very important question, a lot of these, in fact, all the SMEs and MSMEs do not have the time, patience, or the resources of, investment in long litigation processes. So ADR becomes a very vital tool, especially for MSMEs and SMEs. So if there are a slew of, litigations or cases or, legal matters, how can the MSMEs and SMEs harness the power of ADR?
I think that because normally the contracts would have an arbitration clause, and they would look at those clauses to expedite and not get into a long litigation. So I think that will be a good test for all those clauses, the force majeure, the ADR coming into play to reduce the length, because finally they would want to more focus on work rather than getting to litigation. And litigation would be, like I said, all three parameters, be it your employees or your clients or the vendors. So it has to be that they utilize that, channelize, and see how best they could use that, and not get derailed from the main focus there. But I think they'll play. I'll expect more arbitrations and conciliations there than litigation going ahead.
Fair enough.
So Anuj, I would see the position of lawyers, whether as a firm or as GCs, to play role of a mediator. Go step back on the ADR also. We have to be a mediator. We have to show the real picture to our partners that we only together can come out of the situation. If we put a partner to litigation, it's not going to solve anything, in my view. So we have to, as Vikrant said, a bigger picture is needed. It has to be that we have to show a positive mindset that yes, we have suffered a situation which has been unprecedented, which is of a pandemic in nature, but it is not that we will not come out of it, and we will only come out of it if we walk together hand in hand, and that relationship has to be nurtured, I think, more carefully in this situation.
Fair enough. So getting Ms. Tiwari in the conversation, a lot of my lawyer friends and my batchmates from law faculty, they take a lot of pride in saying that they, as a country counsel, they are the ultimate custodian of the corporate governance, of the organization. And for that, in fact, they can even veto the MD or the CEO, because they are answerable to the board, to the shareholders for corporate governance. So when it comes to corporate governance, what do you think are the most important constituents in this, post-lockdown era, you feel?
So I would not necessarily say that we are the custodians of it, but I would rather say that we have to keep that fine balance, and essentially we ensure all the time that we do not overstep any legal or statutory requirement, be it codified, be it not codified. So our attempt always is to maintain that balance, and instead of saying, taking that aggressive view to say that we make sure and we have the veto power, I would rather say that we have that responsibility to make sure that whosoever is making that decision is rightfully aware of what they have to do. So if I understand well the pros and cons of a certain thing, of a certain regulation, of a certain procedure for governance or corporate governance for that matter, all of them who are seated there, they make that right judgment and they are rightfully aware of it. Post lockdown, as we were just talking, and I happened to mention that there are a lot of compliances which have been deferred. So from a statutory point of view, we will have to make sure that we have a note of all of it. It is not so that it is not missed, forgotten, or because generally what happens is that, and most organizations also have this risk management plan all the time, and this risk management necessarily is not limited to the business risk or operational risk. We also have ourselves rated on the compliance bit of it. So given the fact that there is a legal change which is happening every second day, we have too many, the list of compliances just become bigger. It is there's nothing taken out of it. It has just been deferred, or it has gone up. We have to make sure that we follow that, and once the lockdown finishes, we make sure that it is all in place. And for that, I think we have to be keeping a track of all of it more than anybody else.
Fair enough. I know I asked you a very contentious question. So, Ms. Khurana, you want to add something on the corporate governance bit post-lockdown?
Just one comment, because I agree with what Abha is saying, that I really think this is the time the in-house counsel are coming into their own. The value is being understood better because we're truly living up to the term counsel. You know, we have a team, we have a seat on the table for a reason. And if I look around and as part of various crisis teams at global, regional, local levels, I think our role is automatically taken for granted that, look, this is what you're supposed to do. So at least we're not going to worry about this. You go do your job. And after that, now come and be a counsel to us, which takes you beyond your role of just being the lawyer for the company.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, Dr. Akhil, please.
So Anuj, taking the little definition of corporate governance as, good practices, I think this is the one moment, in the history of, India Inc. or the global corporate sector, where it is going to be tested whether we do the walk the talk. So whatever companies may do that we are a good corporate governance based entities, this is the time to demonstrate it. So for example, companies, we may want to take the benefit of the COVID situation not to pay our bank dues. But is that the right corporate governance strategy? We may not want to pay our suppliers. Is that the right corporate governance strategy? We may like to, fire more people than we are required to do. Is it a good corporate governance practice? So all these things will face the real test when the lockdown is lifted. True. And what is it that we as a GC, we sit down with the audit committees, we sit down with the board of directors, we sit down with the senior management team and make them understand that you have to walk the talk now.
True.
And that is what we have to do in terms of actually demonstrating a corporate governance situation. It is more about how sound business practices and philosophies that we vouch for are actually put to test. And this is the best time to do it, in my view.
Spot on. We should not be tweeting to the Honorable Prime Minister, hey, I donated X amount of CRs to your CARES fund, and on the other side, I'm silently laying off my workers.
No, I also have a view on that. CSR also is a corporate responsibility.
Responsibility as per the law.
It is also because we should remember that an organization will operate for the stakeholders. They will not only operate for shareholders. And CSR is one such responsibility which has to be demonstrated, especially in such times.
Great. So good, you got this point up, Dr. Prasad. So has there been any relaxation on CSR? Question number one, can we divert the CSR funds towards our employees' welfare, or is some company diverts towards salaries or other expenses? What are the repercussions? Something on that?
So, go ahead. No, so there have been quite a lot of relaxations, where PM cares, and then if you are spending or investing in the COVID situation for your employees, that also will be recognized as a CSR activity. But I think it has to be a more deeper thought than that. It has to be more in terms of caring about everybody that is associated with a corporation. And that is what to me is real CSR. CSR not in terms of 2% of corporate profits going into a account of an NGO. But I think what has to be really seen is what is the impact that an organization can make on the entire ecosystem. That is what has to be tested today.
Okay, something on that usage of CSR funds for paying the bills or paying employee salaries, something on that? Ms. Khurana, you need to unmute yourself.
No, there is a very, there's the notification that's out, and it defines very, very clearly what can be treated as CSR and what cannot. So for instance, you can, any contribution to PM Cares is CSR. However, any contribution to, say, a chief minister's fund or a state fund is not CSR. So it has been defined very clearly now to take care of this confusion that has arisen and all these conversations that have been taking place. And it actually does say that payment to employees is not CSR. So it is quite detailed and it's out there. It's on the websites everywhere.
On the website. Yeah, a lot is on the website, but very less inside the mind, and even least on the application front.
That's true. There's just one thing, Anuj, that we have not discussed, and I know it's not part of this, but maybe another topic of discussion at some other point of time. With so many people working from home, have we seen that the cyber attacks, phishing attacks, all of that is going through the roof? I mean, it's on a daily basis.
I know, it's not a joke.
So we're talking firewalls, we're talking breaching of firewalls, etc., etc. And that's another
firewalls on fire.
In fact, that's another big thing that's landing on our tables now for all us in-house counsel.
The biggest takeaway from this would be the business continuity, the IT, because people would go for certifications now. Like we are one of the few ISO 27K certified law firm in the country. So your firewalls and DLPs were in place. So I think people would be moving up to those certifications, the technology, using technology more to prevent such kind of an issue. And I think that would be a big takeaway from these things, that business continuity, the contractual liabilities, understanding that and having those clauses read and added to the agreements. Because right now it was more of a, just add a force majeure clause. But now I think everybody would be giving a good thought to that.
I think, Anuj, that's very rightly said by everyone. Probably the next point of discussion could be, as and when you have more time, about the technology. Because at this point of time, the way we are moving with the more usage of technology, at one side, it brings more kind of open questions about the usage, about the infringement, but equally it brings a lot of incentives in terms of, say, saving of cost. Today, the courts all across, they have started working on this kind of video conferencing.
True.
What was stopping courts earlier from doing this? We are doing all our filings through all these online kind of scenarios. That's saving a lot of papers from printing. So I think definitely the crisis has bring a lot of good things also to us. The usage of more technology. We have less usage of oil. OPEC today or yesterday, they have cut their output by 50%. So these are all the good kind of advantages which have also come up. So probably that's the next thing to debate.
Great. And we have one question also from one of our viewers that I've just sent this to you on chat as well. Do you see this lockdown bringing in better legal protection for migrant and contractual workers in the future, looking at the mayhem and the exodus that has taken place?
I guess we'll wake up to a different reality altogether. And our contracts are no longer going to be written because we are getting into a business. It is more going to be written because one day they are going to be read and interpreted. And there is a lot, and there will be a hell lot of guidelines, or I would say protection measures, which will come up from courts, from law, from the government, to make sure that we protect our people, which does not exist today. So going forward, I think more than the law and policy and compliances, it's going to be the contracts, the next new big thing which will determine our relationships across.
Great. And we would also like to again reiterate to our viewers that if you have any query even later, or you need any help on force majeure, you can write to us and we'll try to get you help either from the experts here and also from the other people who can volunteer to help. And by the way, this discussion was fantastic. In fact, we didn't even get to know how the time just lapsed. This reminds me of a dialogue from a movie I was watching just before this conversation, Sholay. Yun ke pata nahi chala Ramgarh kab aa gaya. So I'll just take in our WAF team as well, which has been working to get this thing up. I'll just get Mr. Jerry sir, and also if Moini is about to join in, we can all in chorus thank them for their support and the coordination they did for us. They're just about to join. In fact, we are 2 minutes up, by the way. Okay, so while they join, anything you feel you still want to harp on it,
I just want to repeat something, Anuj, that most of the people have been saying a positive message that let's hold hands together, let's stay indoors, be safe, and this too shall pass, because we have seen a lot of adversity. We have faced a lot of adversities in life, but we have always come out better, and we will do that this time also.
I'm into that.
Great. And what if people are not a lot of businesses, they start conserving cash. They stop paying their suppliers. They stop for example, they stop paying rent for their facility that they have hired, and their explanation can be that, hey, we're not going to the office, it's a lockdown, we're all working from home, we will not pay rent for this month. So a lot of people are not paying rents for their facility. And so what is the ethical part of it? What is the legal part of it?
This is not okay, because not paying rent has no impact on it. You're still using the facility. You got to pay the rentals. This is a sheer breach of contract.
So they say, hey, we're not going to the office. Why should we pay rent?
You're using it.
You're
The space is occupied.
You're still occupying the premises.
Right.
There's
You're in possession, you're occupying.
Exactly.
So.
Absolutely. I think we all agree on that one.
No, but ethically, I mean, there are talks, a lot of people are talking to their landlords or tenants, and they're coming to a conclusion to reduce the rent or, work out something where both of them gain. So we are seeing a lot of that coming up. And as lawyers, we are helping them to come to a common ground.
So Anuj, there is no right or wrong answer. For example, I read that H&M has been talking to a lot of mall owners that they don't want to pay rent. But H&M, which is 100% retail business,
True,
may want to do that. And I don't see any harm in doing that, because it's about a business sustainability. For them, that is one of the biggest costs for a store. So it depends on the business to business, how it impacts them.
So essentially, as Mr. Rana mentioned, baat karke hi baat banti hai. You have to speak, you have to come to, a logical, a fair ground. But when it comes to taking a legal stand, of course, everything is there in contract. So legally, of course, you have to pay the rent. But on a humane side or from being supportive, you can always talk it out. So that the guy doesn't go broke eventually. All right. So Moini is joining in. We can't see her video, but surely her name is here. So
hi, I'm here.
Hi Moini, welcome back. Where is Mr. Jyoti?
Yeah, thank you so much. So am I too early in?
You are delayed, by the way, by 5 minutes. We thought you guys have forgotten. We were about to wrap up.
No, I think Jerry is finding it a little difficult to log in. He just called. I don't know why, because me too, I don't even, they don't ask me for the password even.
Seamless entry, huh?
Seamless entry, I guess. But yeah, it was a wonderful discussion, and thank you so much for your insights, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anuj, for holding it. Thank you so much. Exactly. Thanks a lot. And it was a great learning for me too.
Yeah, great learning for me, for everybody. And I'm sure all our viewers would benefit from this. And we will be, surely taking it far and wide through WAF TV to all the 125 countries where we have our members, the suppliers, the people, the automakers, the mobility people, the dealers, everybody end to end in the automotive and mobility. Thank you so very much for taking out time. This shall surely be extremely helpful and useful. Thank you so very much from the heart.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.